Welcome back to the Sport and Crypto podcast, where we talk to leaders in sports and Web3. Joining me on today's episode is Sarah Dale, who is the head of global partnerships and entertainment in Binance. How's it going, Sarah?
It's good. Thanks for having me.
It's been a long time coming, huh?
It has. I feel like we've been talking about this for a while.
Well, we only met properly for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, this would be good recorded.
I'm happy to do it.
And why don't you tell us a bit about your background and your journey? Because it's really fascinating how you've ended up working in crypto.
Right. So, I've worked in sports entertainment for 20 years in different capacities, but I've always represented brands, whether I was on the marketing side, on the legal side, on their agency side, and really helping them to bring their brand strategies to life and really developing those strategic and innovative opportunities for them.
And the interest in Web3, crypto, how does that come about when you're working in your former industry?
Yeah, so I think that I knew before I started working for Binance, I knew there was a tremendous potential in bringing Web3 into sports, right? And developing new experiences, new opportunities, and that there was just an untapped resource there that could make those partnerships and those experiences even stronger and more exciting. So I was already starting to kind of like look into that.
Accidentally.
I manifested.
And, you said there was an opportunity when you kind of first saw under the hood. And, from the outside in, my perception is like 2021, the deals that were done then, way different to what's going on now. And there was probably some immaturity and exuberance then. What's the biggest flip that you've seen over that time since you've been at Binance?
So I think in general, the industry has matured, right? So crypto is entering a new era. The adoption from the institutional adoption, the increased regulation, the adoption of more mainstream players. I think the industry in general is matured. And the way that we're approaching partnerships is also matured. And I think there are, a lot more, respected entities now in the space. And so that's, it's kind of this domino effect of, there's more respect for crypto businesses in the sports industry. There's more respect for what we're looking for. There's more understanding. And so we're kind of seeing both the industry evolve and our engagement in sports as a result.
And the people that you're speaking to in sports, have they also started to understand the types of relationships that crypto entities want with these sports brands?
I think an effective dialogue is always necessary, is still necessary. And that's because it's hard, our industry is changing so quickly, and it's hard for someone who is, on the outside trying to keep up. And so I think really working with our sports partners or potential sports partners to, educate them on our industry, educate them on our business, our goals, objectives, our challenges is really important. And, the different audiences that we have as well and what makes them tick is key.
So let's start from the top down, right? I'm a sports brand and you're Binance. And what are like the KPIs? You're entering a sports deal and you're like, we want to pay X, but we want to get this from it. Without sounding too crude, what is a crypto exchange like Binance looking for when they, apart from the obvious, which is like branding, right? What are they looking for when it comes to partnerships like this?
We are looking at both the commercials as well as the brand equity. So the branding that you mentioned, that's really table stakes, right? So we are looking for the ROI on brand health and brand growth, right? So brand awareness and branding is not really enough for us. What's the business impact that we're going to drive? What's the use case that we're going to develop? What's the experience for our community? I think that's really important. And we need to be able to tell a story through our partners, right? So we're choosing partners who can help us build trust and credibility and education. Mm-hmm. That leads to that adoption. And so how do we do that with them is really important.
And have you seen that translation from, wow, we now see that when we're doing X partnership or delivering on this part of this partnership, there's loads more people coming to Binance, or there's loads more people trading or interacting with Binance, the exchange?
So I think from a mainstream sports and entertainment perspective, I am really working to, not only on that awareness element, but really that credibility, that trust, that education. And so we're developing use cases that help people understand, the power of blockchain and Web3 beyond trading and investing, right?
Yeah.
So I think, we really understand the value of showing what blockchain and Web3 can do outside of that. That helps build credibility, that helps non-investors, non-crypto traders kind of get their minds around Web3 and demystifies it a little bit, right? So
and also like Binance now and most big crypto exchanges, the product just isn't just trading, right? There's just so much to it. And I remember someone said to me once, oh, well, isn't this kind of like you'd have a gambling partnership where they're just trying to get people through the door and to place bets? And I was like, if you think of placing bets as like equivocating that to the exchange and the trade part, fine. But, you could have someone that holds a lot of their dollar wealth on one of these crypto exchanges and uses that to pay their family from Nigeria to Shanghai. Like there's different products and, getting yield also as an alternative to yield-bearing instruments in traditional finance. There's a lot that can be done on these exchanges now that you couldn't do in 2020.
100%. And Binance has the full ecosystem, right? And so, and we want people to, do their research, and we're using sports and entertainment to grow adoption for the industry as well as acquisition for Binance, but we're helping them along their journey. And there's a lot of education along that journey. So at the end of the day, I'm not so focused on these new users coming in and trading tomorrow, or, I'm first, I want to educate them, I want to bring them on board, and I want to be a part of their journey. And we speak to them through sports, and it's working out well.
And give us some examples of that. You've obviously got the huge partnership with Ronaldo and a bunch of others. When you're picking which properties to work with, you mentioned that you're looking for partners that you can tell your story through, and that's really important. But when you're doing your kind of analysis internally, what are some of the key things that you're looking at when you're thinking that's someone we really should work with?
Right. So I think, at the outset, we're looking for partners, whether it's teams, organizations, players that can have shared beliefs. Is their community important to them? Do they see the benefits of crypto, right? And then from a tactical perspective, we're looking to partners who have reach and engagement, and so that we can reach an audience that we otherwise wouldn't have, right? We're looking for partners who there's a shared DNA that helps us build an authentic story, right? Which is easy in sports, right? Easier. There's performance, there's resilience, there's adaptability, there's speed. There's, we can really kind of lean into that shared DNA. Like we mentioned, we're looking at the ROI. Is it cost effective? What can we do with them, and what can we expect from them is really important as well. So I think that's kind of how we approach it. And then, that helps us to, build a strategic partnership that's not just throwing a logo, isn't just putting a line on camera. It's a long, it's a longer term partnership, right? So I think that's really important to us.
What are some of the specific things that you're doing beyond the kind of slap brand or slap logo on car or athlete that are exciting you?
So we don't slap logos, first of all. So I think, with respect to Cristiano, for example, we helped him develop his NFT collection. There's multiple drops. We're, going into drop 6 soon. And we work with him to develop those NFT collections that feature, moments that have mattered to him, pivotal moments in his career, in his professional and personal. We've developed experiences around that. So, we have taken CR7 NFT holders to meet him, to train with him, to play football with him, to do celebrations with him. We've sent them to his matches. We've, sent them, exclusive swag. So we're really kind of bringing them in on this NFT journey, but then also, bringing them closer to him than anyone else has, right? When it comes to F1, we have our VIP clients who are F1 fans. We're developing driving experiences for them. And most recently, we've developed, we're doing our second helmet design takeover for Pierre Gasly. And so we had a user design competition, and one of our users actually designed the helmet that he will wear in the Australian Grand Prix. Right. And then not only is he wearing that, but it will be created into a mural in Melbourne with a local artist there. There'll be an AR experience. And so we've really come full circle. And then on the ground in Melbourne, we have Binance Meetup, we have scavenger hunts, we have meet and greets, we have watching the race, So we really kind of build that full experience around the partnership.
When you're having conversations with these sports brands, when does it get a bit like, yeah, I don't know about this. I don't know if this is going to work. They don't really understand what's going to happen here. What are some of the most common things that go wrong when you're speaking to rights holders, in the sense that they just don't really get what a crypto business might want from a partnership like this?
I think, and I've been doing this long enough that I can see a proposal and I know that it's just been taken off the shelf, right? And I'm like, wow, you didn't do your homework,
Do you think the perception is still from a lot of rights holders that it's easy money?
I think so.
And do you think that's why sometimes you get those proposals where you're like, they've not even tried?
I think so. I mean, I don't say I blame them, but, I don't have a lot of time. So, let's make it worth both of our while, right? Because if you get my attention, I will, we will have a conversation. If you put together a thoughtful note, I will respond. I will read it. I will pay attention. And if you don't, sometimes I tell you why this makes no sense, right? So I think it's a two-way conversation, right? Like, they've got to do their homework, learn the industry, learn our business, learn the audience, what's going to drive the needle for us in a partnership. And it's not going to be the same that a beer brand needs. It's not going to be the same that a small startup needs. We are, the biggest exchange in the world, the most popular, the most licensed, the safest. We are really beyond some of those initial basic things that, some other brands may want in a partnership.
We're recording early March, and we just did a piece on Tether buying a piece of Juventus that was really well read. I think it's probably going to be one of our best pieces ever, which is awesome. And one of the things I wrote in it was, crypto companies are now becoming so big that they're not just crypto companies anymore. I think Binance still are, but they are so big that you can't really have conversations about partnerships like this when you said, where there's this kind of thought of, well, we'll get the money, and like, if they're still here in 3 years, all good, which I think was definitely the kind of perspective in 2021. That was definitely wow, this offer's on the table right now. Let's go do that, and get as much money in as upfront as we can, because these guys might not be here in a few years.
Too good to be true.
It's too good to be true. But like, some of these crypto businesses are more profitable per employee than any business on the planet, and they're going to be around for a long time. And so they don't have to rush. And so that kind of changes the dynamic, right?
100%. And I think, Binance never had that sense of FOMO. It wasn't trying to go out and grab all these partnerships and do all these things. And we still don't. We really approach them conservatively. And for us, it's not so that, we're not going to be here in 3 years. It's that, what is the market going to be doing in 3 years? What are our priorities going to be in 3 years? What are our goals and objectives? We're going to have more licenses. We're going to have, more regulations. It's going to be better in 3 years. And so that's the change that we're not going away, but there will be a lot of changes in 3 years. So this kind of, to segue, you didn't ask this question, but, we are moving so fast and things are changing so that it is hard for us to do long-term planning for partnerships. So in my prior life, I negotiated 10-year deals. That's just not going to happen. It's hard for us to get a 2 or 3 year partnership, which we do have, through, because we simply don't know what we're planning for next year based on technology, the pace of adoption, the pace of regulation, and what we're seeing in the industry.
Is there a frustration sometimes from sports brands that you speak to, where they're like, well, here's the 5-year deal plan, and you're like, cut that in half?
Well, so right, I don't know if there's frustration or if they are so used to their tiers and their levels and their packages. So I think that they're used to that, and there's there's an inflexibility, right? And then I think too, they probably are a little suspect. Like, what do you mean you can't be committed to, this long-term situation or relationship? And so I think there's a little bit of that, but that's why I think if they educate themselves in the industry, in our business, give us some of that flexibility, and, truly customize the partnership, it will make sense. But I can see why, they don't want to stray from their structure. They're curious why, it works for everybody else, but it doesn't work for us, but this industry is very different than anything we've ever seen before.
It is. That it is. One more question before we go into break and go into the second half. Everyone has a boss, some way, somehow. When you're getting questioned about deals and spend and ROI, what are some of the most common questions that you get where you're trying to like manage up while negotiating with the sports team?
There is definitely a focus on the commercial, aspect and the impact that we will be driving from the top, right? And I think that when I'm preparing, I've done my homework before I'm presenting this business case, and I've worked through kind of what does our reach and engagement look like? How many new users can we expect out of this? What's the product integration look like? What are the new experiences that we can develop? What can we bring to our users, and what can we bring to their fans? And there's not even a set formula. It changes with every property, right? Some may lean heavy in education, where some may lean heavy in hospitality. It really depends on the property, but they're looking to understand, how are we growing adoption for the industry? How are we growing acquisition for Binance? How are we educating? How are we telling our story? And what's the impact on that? Or what's the results from that?
Before we move on to part 2, I'm happy to remind you that this podcast is sponsored by the HBAR Foundation. The most beloved sports brands understand that what fans want is simple: a reason to be passionate. The HBAR Foundation enables brands and fans to share their passion on-chain using the Hedera network, the most used sustainable enterprise-grade DLT for the decentralized economy. Visit linkedin.com/company/HBAR Foundation to learn more and get the latest HBAR Foundation and Hedera network news. This podcast is also supported by Credenza. Credenza harnesses blockchain technology to power a real-time data synchronization platform that transforms customer data ecosystems. They make data more relevant and actionable for sports brands, teams, leagues, and IP owners. Find out more at credenza3.com. Welcome back to part 2 of this episode, and let me ask you a question. So, what are the big opportunities that you're seeing right now in the sports market for someone like Binance?
Yeah, so for Binance, even though we are a global crypto exchange, we are really focused right now on regional and local opportunities. And the reason why is there is a clear regulatory framework. There are clear guidelines for us. And so we can better, activate, optimize, and maximize those partnerships because we have that clarity. And so the risk is reduced, right? We like to go where the regulation is. We like to know where, to enter that clear compliance landscape. And so for us, it's more about the regional and local partnerships at the moment. Honestly, it's harder for us to turn on a major global partnership because there are markets where they don't allow crypto yet. It's not that they don't allow Binance, they don't allow crypto yet, or there's not a clear crypto framework. And so we'd rather really double down in those markets where it's clear. It's where the regulators love us, the users love us, and that's where we will.
What are some of the regions that you think are exciting for you as a business right now?
So right now our priority markets, and I think it's probably obvious to those, watching the markets, from a clarity, perspective for everyone, right? LATAM, MENA, Asia, those, are just a little more simpler for
different reasons as well, right? LATAM,
for sure.
A lot of LATAM has hyperinflation. They're trying to use dollars, and stablecoins have become a great access point. MENA, obviously, like regulatory frameworks, but also like a lot of capital. And then Asia has been most progressive probably when it comes to regulation since 2017.
You nailed it, because exactly. Why those regions are prioritizing crypto is very different. And then what we do with our partnerships in those regions based on those user interest and needs is different, right? So, depending on what they may be using Binance for, they may need to know about Binance, for, could be different. But those regions are simply, better for us to activate partnerships in right now.
And are there any sports that are exciting you that you're not involved in already? I mean, one of the things that I wanted to ask as well, like, we're in a really interesting phase right now where you have something like Kings League sprout up 4 years ago, and it's already like huge. Pickleball, paddle, like there is an onslaught of greenfield sports and leagues. There's, talk of an NBA competitor, $4-5 billion raised for that. There's talks of the NBA doing a EuroLeague competitor in Europe. So like we're in a really interesting space right now from a sports perspective. Is any of that opportunity for someone like Binance?
We really do look to sports and or properties or athletes who are best in class like we are, right? So as much as I love an underdog story or a startup story, that's just not where we are, because we need partners who have that reach and engagement, right? Who already have that established credibility, who, we can truly leverage, because Binance is already so big and so massive. So, we bring so much value. And so we need a partner that does that as well.
Sure.
And so I would say that new and emerging properties are probably not in our immediate strategy.
Yeah.
That could change in 6 months. Things change all the time, but they're not in our immediate strategy. But from a, sports that we're not in perspective, oh my gosh, paddle comes up all the time. And, can't ignore cricket either.
Yeah,
so,
of course, which of course is huge and has so many fans and so many really well-known players and athletes, right?
And the numbers seem fake, but they're not. I trust them, but it's quite unbelievable. And then I would say it also, not only are those sports, very interesting to us, but we're looking for, at the audience demographics as well. Do the demographics make sense? Do those audience interests make sense to us? And so I think there's a, an evaluation that looks at the audience, that looks at the reach and engagement. Those are the two sports that keep popping on my radar.
Hit things with a ball. The rights structure in some of these sports are so different, right? Compare, tennis to football to the NBA, especially, US has a much more centralizing kind of body with the player associations and then the leagues themselves. What is it like maneuvering in a market where there is such different rights packages for such different sports and leagues and teams and such?
So I think that's where Binance has done a really good job of, not only kind of controlling its FOMO of, buying partnership for the sake of keeping up with our competitors, but we have, we know what works for us, we know what doesn't work for us, and we know that these partnerships have to deliver because we've developed a business case. We have to be accountable for that business case. Otherwise, there will be no more partnerships. And so we, really have to lean into the customization of our partnerships. And I think those conversations go well with some properties and they don't with others, and that's okay. We're not for everyone, but we're not going to, force fit something that's just not going to deliver, because it's not going to be good for any of us.
The other question I was going to ask is, you talked about some of the things that you want to do and build with some of these partners. A lot of people I speak to, they want to do all of this and they end up doing this because you get to crunch time and you're like, this is what we're going to deliver. And on the other side of the coin, there are a lot of people that are doing very expansive things, right? Whether it be Web3 loyalty applications, in some instances, whole leagues built on chain, and kind of moving in that direction where the blockchain element becomes a lot more integral to the offering, right? Is there a temptation for Binance to ever go in that direction, or is it more difficult because you're trying to you're trying to not silo, but you're trying to keep things in the box that is the exchange and the products that surround it?
No, we 100% want to think about meaningful integration as part of any negotiation or any evaluation. And what that integration is can take many forms, whether it's NFTs, whether it's Binance Pay, whether it's a loyalty program, a fan engagement program. It can take, many different forms, and based on our capabilities and our resources at the time, based on the property's willingness to develop that, the time that we have, because that takes time. And so what is possible? And sometimes we like to kind of start slow and test and learn and see, how things develop, and then kind of go from there.
You talked about some of the poorer plans that you've seen when people send you stuff, right? But have you seen, since you've been at Binance over the last 3 years, have you actually seen them get better? Like, have you seen sports brands come to you and say, this is what you want, and it almost blows your mind because you're like, whoa, this is pretty in depth. Like, I don't even know if we can do all this stuff.
Yes, and I love it when they make my job easier. That is a really good place to start. And so that's very helpful, because then it kind of inspires us and motivates us. But we still are, at the end of the day, our priority is the exchange, is our current community. And so we don't have, we are a lean and mean team, and we don't have the resources to do all the things at once. So sometimes we just have to prioritize, right? And so it kind of comes back to that conversation of like, well, where's the best, or not necessarily the most, but where's the best impact? Let's prioritize that. Where's the most meaningful impact, or where's the best way to kind of test this, or how can we get started the soonest? I think it's just an evaluation of that. But we've definitely seen, really great ideas that inspire us, get our attention, and we kind of tuck away until the time is right.
You mentioned a few things there, we both did. What are some of the common things that keep coming up from sports teams? Like, what is the stuff that they want to do with crypto partners?
Loyalty and fan engagement. I think that's where it is a big, because I think for them, it's a way to kind of tap, another way for them to tap into their audience.
Yeah.
And they can bring more value to their fans as well, right? And so, and transparency too, right? And so I think that is really helpful for them. And of course, they're interested in where the additional revenue streams are, So where can we develop the additional revenue streams, whether it's through tokenization, or whatnot. So I think, gaming, things like that is very interesting to them at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the loyalty conversation is really interesting, because we've seen a few examples pop up over the last year or two. I think the Cleveland Cavaliers have done a really interesting thing recently called Cavs Rewards that we wrote about a while ago. That has already seen some pretty good results. I think there is going to be a temptation over the next couple of years to do bigger things in this space or in this intersection. And I think that the monetization angle was really, really interesting, because if you as a sports team or league, mainly teams, you have this huge audience, right? But actually, like, you can only talk to a portion of them, right? Whereas that's pretty alien for a company like Binance, right? You've got the emails, the numbers, the usernames of every person that's on your platform, and maybe even more if they use Binance Pay alongside the exchange and the NFT platform.
Right.
You have like a lot of data. Whereas a lot of these teams, they're just kind of like, we've got the email and this is them as a fan. I mean, you want to say something?
I don't know. It's crazy how there's a lot of the untapped data optimization, and how valuable that is if it's realized is a little crazy to think.
Does that shock you sometimes when you're having the conversations with teams where they're just like, we just don't know?
I don't think it's shocking, because I think, they've got to choose their battles. We've got to choose our battles.
Sure.
Their priority is winning games. Ours is our crypto exchange. But I think data is very, important, both from a security perspective as well as, what we can tap into for that. Another thing I meant to mention is, teams are also interested in ticketing.
Yeah.
So, which is great too, from both, kind of blocking, fraudulent ticketing, a lot of the ticketing issues that we've seen, with some of these big tours, things like that, as well as like souvenirs, right? And providing kind of that touch point, and then being able to follow up with those guests in a more meaningful way as well. So I think ticketing is important. And then you just mentioned finance pay, and that's another thing that a lot of our partners are interested in, because we have almost 300 million users, right? We have a lot of Binance Pay users, crypto, holders, are sometimes affluent, and so they have disposable income, and so tapping into that audience that is ready to spend with Binance Pay is appealing to a lot of our partners as well as other brands, right?
Yeah.
So
they might be affluent, or they might be in areas or regions where it's difficult to pay for stuff.
Right, and it's borderline.
Same in Spain or like Italy or England when they live in Venezuela, for example.
Right, and there's no fees for them. It's borderless. There's less fees for the vendor as well. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of that on the payment side come to the fore over the next 2 to 3 years. Firstly, like B2B, but I think it'll increasingly become B2C. I mean, you folks, amongst many, have probably seen the volumes rapidly increase on the stablecoin side, even the crypto payment side. I saw Visa and Avalanche launch a credit card the other day. And some of this might seem quite strange to Westerners, but if you live in a country where your month's pay is worth 10% less than it was last month, that's a big deal.
Right.
And if you're also happen to be a fan of a team and you want to buy something from that team, but you've got 10% less expendable income because you've been paid in your local currency, that becomes an issue, right? And so I think that's also some of the pain points, especially in soccer, right? Which I know Binance is big in, but that is huge in the global south, in a lot of countries where the GDP is lower, but also there is that kind of like inflation or currency risk. And if you can have a route out of that via a partner, that seems really interesting.
Right. There's something for everyone.
I didn't know if I was stepping on any like potential plans there. So
and you'll learn more things.
So you've got the sports side. You mentioned gaming as well. That's obviously been a huge crossover from the like sports and Web3 side. So we've seen NFL Rivals, we've seen SoRare, we've seen a bunch of fancy games. Where is Binance's strategy when it comes to laddering towards that side of the entertainment chasm as well? Because it's so big now, right?
Right, and it's really important to do it right. We know that audience can, sniff out the wrong move. You only get one chance to do it right, and so I think that's why we've really been cautious to really evaluate the full landscape, and we've spent a lot of time fully evaluating the landscape. But this is an area where, no surprise, that audience over indexes with the audience that cares about Binance or cares about trading or investing, right? And so that audience is important to us. Also, gaming in general is borderless, right? It transcends borders, it transcends cultures. So that's important.
They're used to buying stuff digitally.
Right. They're digital natives, they're early adopters. So for many reasons, that audience makes a lot of sense. And we are just trying to finalize the best way in. Whether that's through team or publishers or events.
I was going to ask you about that actually, like, because of what you've done in sports is sometimes the easier route to think, oh, well, esports or competitive gaming teams is now e-athletes, right? Is that the easier route to go down than like, say, why don't you build a game on our infrastructure or using this tech vendor or this company that we're invested in, where maybe the overlap and the onboarding to Binance is a little bit more abstracted?
Good question. And I can't give away all of our secrets. But I will say that, we're not game developers.
Yeah.
We're not game publishers. We are crypto experts, right? So, and Web3 experts. So I think we will, look to partners to, help us enter the space.
And just back onto the esports side of things, do you think that's a big market potentially for you? Like, are you still seeing that? Because I know it's had a bit of a tough time over the last couple of years. Do you still see that as a big opportunity considering some of the things we just discussed?
Yeah, I think it is, because there's still that like kind of that passionate fandom, that excitement. So I think it provides a lot of opportunity.
So final questions. And I think we're lucky to have someone like you who has a legal background, IP background, and now you're in this really interesting role. We've written a lot about how there's been just clear IP infringement, right? Whether it's someone using the image rights of a player when they shouldn't have because they think it's fine because it's on an NFT, a trophy, or using the Nike swoosh, right? I remember, like, was that on StockX or another platform? I don't remember. It was pretty crazy, right? And to me, I remember when I was doing some consulting work when this craze was happening, 21, 22, even 23, I was like, I just don't understand why people think this is okay because it's on just another digital medium. Like, you'd never do this on a poster or like any other digital artifact, but because it's on chain, people think it's okay. When you kind of first walked into your role at Binance, you must have seen some of this from the outside and then some of this from the inside. That's pretty crazy for someone with a legal background to be walking into, right?
Yeah, I have to kind of not take for granted that I am hypersensitive to intellectual property rights, potential infringement, non-partner marketing. And so I have to remind myself of that still, to be honest, but very much in the beginning. And so I think that not only, at Binance, but everybody has kind of come a long way in this space. And sometimes you learn best from your mistakes than your successes. And so, whether it's in our approach to creative review or whether it's in our approach to contract drafting, I think we've gotten a lot more sophisticated, right? There's a better understanding of what we can do, what we can't do, what we should anticipate, what we, how to prepare for things that we can't even anticipate because we're in this, new frontier. But I think that there's also kind of an understanding of we're learning a little bit and building as we go. Mm-hmm. And so as long as we kind of quickly, pick ourselves back up, learn from that mistake, and move forward in the right way, it's serving us all well.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of sports teams, leagues, they went through this phase at first where some of them were just giving away all their rights in what package, right? The blockchain rights. Anything on the blockchain is yours, which I think if you got for a good price as an exchange or a crypto company, you're like, wow, this is awesome. We can do whatever we want, mm-hmm. right? But it might be daunting also because you can have to do all this stuff to make it worth the while. And then I think we saw some of the maturity happen, but maybe segment the rights too much, where you suddenly had, NFTs and then moving images and then NFT but for games and mm-hmm. then NFT but for fantasy games and then so on and so on and so forth. Do you ever have conversations with some of those teams where it's kind of like, guys, if this sliver, if you think it's worth this much?
Right. So I think from our perspective, it's my job to make our category protection as broad as possible.
Right. Okay. Is that difficult?
It all comes down to who has the negotiation leverage and power. But, how much do we want to pay for that exclusivity? We might not have had to pay for it 3 years ago. And now that there are, so many new players in the space, so many new providers of different products and services in the space, and finance happens to do it all, but not everybody does, right? So I think, there's more competition for a sliver of that category, and for those categories to be defined a little bit differently. I mean, the alcohol industry went through this a few years ago, right? It's like, who would have suspected that seltzer was going to have this moment? And nobody had protected, who owns that category, And so I think we are kind of having that now as well. So are we crypto exchange? Are we blockchain? Are we NFTs? We are all of it.
Yeah.
And, what's the price that we want to pay to have that broad exclusivity? Are we really going to take advantage of it so that it justifies that cost? Are we willing to let, some other brands come in, but maybe not all? It's just really kind of an evaluation of what's important, what's the threat, what's the risk, what's the benefit, of course, that we need to consider. But that's a really good point, because I think going back to the education of the industry and of the business, if you come to me, I'm going to make that category definition super broad. Because that's my job.
That's really interesting though, because when you look at some of these deals that have been done, whether they're at crazy prices or at not that big prices, sometimes I think it's almost a lose-lose for the crypto company. And I'll explain why I think that. If you do well and it's driven loads of engagement and the team sees it's done well, they turn around to you and say, well, now this is the price because X, Y, and Z are interested. If it does badly, then you've got no ROI as the partner, and they might just go sell it to someone else who might think that they can do better. Do you ever have those kind of like conversations where people are, saying, hey, this has gone really well, and now this is the price, or the team has done better, and they're like, well, our engagement's gone up loads, and you were on the thing, and now it's going to be worth way more. Are those difficult conversations as well?
I don't think they're difficult. I think they're fun, because what's, the value that the team sees in media or championships, doesn't always correlate to our business results, right? Yeah. And so again, it's a partnership. So what they're getting out of it, they're valuing things differently than we are. And if it's working hard for us, extremely hard for us, then we may be able to justify a stronger business case, which I would love for that to happen. I would love for things to over deliver, and so we could do more, we could do bigger, we could do longer. That would not be a bad problem to have.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. No, I'm really glad I asked the legal questions. I thought it would be the most boring bit of the podcast.
I'm trying to be a recovering lawyer, but I can't take that hat off.
Well, I think that's all we've got time for. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to find me. Sarah Dale, Fed Finance on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to the newsletter as well, newsletter.sportandcrypto.com. You can find me at Pet Barisha on Twitter or on LinkedIn as well. Just remember that none of what we have said during the show is financial, investment, or business advice, and this content is for informational purposes only. Web3 is underpinned by crypto, and crypto is volatile, meaning you can lose money if you are buying these assets personally or as a business. Where we're recording right now, the majority of crypto asset companies are unregulated. Thank you very much once more for listening, and leave us 5 stars if you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.